By the early 2000s, Need for Speed was an established arcade racing series with fast cars, exotic locations, police obstacles, and fun gameplay all round. However, Hot Pursuit 2 received mixed reviews in 2002, even though I think it's a good game. But on the flip side, the PlayStation 2 port developed by Black Box received critical acclaim, so they were given the task of developing the next title in the series, which was making its first real shift into another era. The import street racing culture was increasing in popularity, right up to the point where movies like The Fast and the Furious and video games like Midnight Club and Burnout were being made for that culture, and Electronic Arts wanted to capitalize on it too with their Need for Speed series. Need for Speed Underground was released for all the 6th generation consoles on November 2003. This is the PlayStation 2 version. Once you enter Underground mode, you're immediately put in the driving seat of a modified Acura RSX and win the race easily, but it turns out you were only daydreaming. A good first impression gameplay wise, however that means you have to select your first car on a budget of 10,000 credits.
Ouch, that is seriously weak, dude.
Yeah, you're telling me. That's Samantha, who gives you tips on how to play the game and occasionally provide you with unique parts for your car. Supposedly, Eddie is the leader and best driver of the Eastsiders crew, and you're the rookie with the unmodified car. So as you'd expect, the goal is to endlessly win races, climb up the rankings of each event category, and design the coolest looking set of wheels to reach the top. Or to be more pedantic, put your car in a garage alone, slap on as many body kits, colours and performance upgrades as possible. Sounds epic if you ask me. This was the first in the Need for Speed series to feature some sort of story, which took gamers by surprise back in 2003, and I think it's well written, not because of the depth or character development, but it adds to the street racing presentation without interrupting the gameplay. Imagine what Need for Speed Underground would be like if it had no plot or characters. You enter Underground mode, select a first car and go straight to the menu. Sounds boring, right? But having an antagonist to chase after gives you extra motivation to prove everyone wrong.
Is that supposed to impress me?
Back in 2003, I thought this was one of the best looking racing games I've ever seen up to that point. I might have exaggerated, especially because it looks a bit outdated today, but reasons why I thought that are present. It has lots of strong colours and glossy effects in the city at night time. Somehow it's just a stunning combination, let alone for a racing game that isn't Mario Kart. I also love the soundtrack. While the Midnight Club games of the 6th generation had hip hop and electronic, Underground adds rock to the mix. The music can be changed so you can listen to it in either the menu or during gameplay. All the events from typical Need for Speed games appear in Underground. You have Circuit, I shouldn't even have to explain. Sprint is basically how the Midnight Club races are structured, but instead of checkpoints you're stuck with the one route. And Lap Knockout is Circuit, only every last place driver is eliminated each lap, and the last driver standing wins. However, there are two other events that make their introduction to the Need for Speed series and coincide with the street racing theme. Drag races are straight line courses but with more obstacles than I can count, and its own control scheme which I'll get to. And drift is about earning the most points through power slides in a set number of laps on a fixed track all to yourself. Unlike Need for Speed Underground 2 or Midnight Club, there's no open map to enter a race, and it's all set up in the menu. I prefer this because while the idea of going to a designated spot adds depth, and it's pretty well done in Underground 2, it can be tedious as well. In Midnight Club street racing, for example, following the opponent driver to the start line for a minute or two is the only way to begin a race. I'm sure they made it easy in the sequels, but here it was harder to start a race and actually win it. Whereas in Need for Speed Underground, you can just select from the menu and the challenge lies in the race itself. As you win races, your name will appear in the rankings for each type of event, and increase your reputation. However, it doesn't make too much sense if the race map only limits you to certain races. What I'm saying is that Underground mode is linear. The ranking system is only there to unlock more upgrades and appear on the front cover of magazines, and whenever you lose a race, you don't lose a place in the rankings. You just have to restart until you eventually win. I remember the old Need for Speed games where you drive on roads surrounded by trees, canyons, desert, snow and small towns. But in Underground, it's set in the middle of a city strictly at night. Known as Olympic City based on the parts of New York, San Francisco and Los Angeles, it follows the Need for Speed formula as a giant map with individual tracks created through roadblocks, with lots of different corner types, high-speed straights and shortcuts. But the worst thing about the track design is the excessive use of traffic. They might as well present themselves as the drone vehicles from F-Zero, because they always seem to get in the way of the worst possible spot. Say you have a racing line set to a T, but when a car is suddenly in the way of a blind corner or jump without a chance to react, most of the time that's the end of your race. It's especially obvious in the drag event, because if you actually collide with the traffic, your car rotates more than a ceiling fan on a summer day. It laughs at the laws of physics. I mean, look at this. And when you eventually get back on four wheels, 90% of the time the car is pointing backwards. Did I also mention they can also get right in the way of a start line? To be fair, the traffic is only a game changer in the latter parts of Underground mode. It's just frustrating when you run into something that you have no chance to react to and have to start again as a result. Because like most arcade racing games, rubber banding is implemented, it's more unfair than challenging, and this will definitely make you angry if you're racing on the hard difficulty. The exotics like Lamborghinis, Ferraris and Porsches are replaced with cars mostly made in Japan like Nissans, Toyotas and Hondas to name a few, and the exotics wouldn't make a return until Most Wanted. Fair enough, the Toyota Supra in particular was used primarily in the first Fast and Furious movie, but why are there fewer cars than its predecessor? Hot Pursuit 2 had 24 cars including 9 police versions, Underground has 20. However, what you can actually do with them more than makes up for it. Almost every part of a car can be customized in some way. Body kit, paint job, accessories, vinyl, sponsor decals, and performance. There are hundreds of potential designs, yet it's extremely simple to comprehend. Anyone can sketch together a car that'll stand out from the crowd. In fact, the only thing I don't like is how limited it is at the start. Sure, it's a good reason to play Underground mode, but this is the best I could do at the beginning. I'm so used to Underground 2, I can't believe how little you're given to start with. You don't even have any performance options. That being said, this was extremely diverse for a racing game back in 2003. Even today, it's still fun to waste time on. Whenever you win a race, not only do you win money to spend on parts, but also style points. You earn the latter through flamboyant driving, including power sliding, taking shortcuts, leading the race, and having close calls with traffic, as well as placing first. And at the end of every race, the points are rounded up to your career total, and it operates as a level setting to unlock additional parts for your car. Your car is rated through a star ranking based on how much has been modified. Reaching a certain number of stars will put the car on the cover of magazines, which you'll need to do to progress through Underground mode. Because style points are all about skillful driving, you expect the driving mechanics to make it all worth playing. The better the performance stats, the faster the car, the better the controls. Right? Okay, the cars are slipperier than I remember. Like it can't cope with the power even if you improve the handling. But you get the hang of it after a couple of races. It feels as old school as the Need for Speed games that came before. One thing you might notice throughout the review is the lack of a wanted system. I don't know why, because if you're racing in the middle of a city with vibrant looking cars, how can the police turn a blind eye? Whether you think that's a good or bad thing is up to you. Like exotic cars, it returned just a couple of years later, so fair enough. Whenever you get hang time, it cuts to a different angle like an action movie. While it looks pretty cool, the biggest problem is that you can't see what's ahead during that angle. What did I say about the traffic before? Fortunately, it can be turned off. However, the drag event is a little different. Since drag racing is all about the timing of your gear changes, the RPM gauge takes most of the left side of the screen, you're stuck with a manual transmission, and RPM levels are color coded, so when you see green, change gear. There's slowdown at the start line which makes it very difficult to get a perfect gear change, but once you hit close to top speed, it's very exciting, because you're changing gears while figuring out the best lane for slipstreaming and avoiding traffic all at the same time. You can lose a race by hitting another car, curse you traffic, or if you rev your own car for too long, which can blow up the engine. So time your use of nitrous oxide properly. It's also worth noting you can simply change lanes by tapping the D-pad left and right. Pressing the wrong button at the wrong time can ruin the whole race, but at least you get infinite continues. This is one of the best events of the game and one of the most satisfying to win, especially on hard. But on the opposite side of car performance, the drift event is about how well you can control a power slide. You earn points based on the angle and speed. Performing a big drift will increase the multiplier, but driving too slowly will decrease it, and colliding with a barrier in the middle of a drift will cancel the points. So drive on an angle fast, get close to the barriers without hitting it, and use a rear-wheel drive car. It'll take a bit of getting used to, especially because all but one of the first cars are front-wheel drive, but at least the cars are more tail-happy specifically for the drift event. Completing Underground mode will basically unlock everything. Yes, you even have the option to create custom cars on an unlimited budget, and use them on other game modes including split screen multiplayer. You can bet I always have the traffic turned off. The only drawback is that even on the Xbox and GameCube it's only 2-player. You could say from a content perspective, Need for Speed Underground was a big step forward. That's what happens if a change in tone is done right. It gives the developers room for fresh ideas while maintaining what we love about the series. Even though it's a completely different setting, at least at the time, it's still a Need for Speed game at heart. You're still driving at blazing speeds on open roads, and the more you play, the more cars and tracks you'll unlock. But instead, you're driving in the city at night with import cars, with plenty of customization options, no wanted system, and 2 new events with their own control scheme. Commercially, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 sold around 4 million copies, but Need for Speed Underground sold closer to 10 million copies. You can make the argument that the series hit its peak in the mid-2000s. Because we have Underground 2 that improves on this one and come to think of it in every way, that's the one I recommend. But Underground 1 set the tone for most Need for Speed titles in the next decade and is still a fun, vibrant and over-the-top racer.